my goodness. First things first, let's give a round of applause to Kash Patel and the FBI for showing the American people how grossly incompetent you guys are. So let's... That round of applause is for the FBI because these idiots had nothing. They didn't have any fingerprints, they didn't have any names, they didn't have any locations. All the images they had were like 3 pixels. These people are absolutely grossly incompetent. Kash Patel is the dumbest person on this planet, possibly, okay? Because the last dumbest person is no longer here.
Damn.
But Kash Patel then goes on in a press conference, bruh, if you can believe this, goes on to say, well, to my friend, we got it here, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
To my friend Charlie Kirk. Rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
What?
Valhalla? What? What are you talking about, Valhalla, bruh? Like, where did he even go? where did he even come up with that, Valhalla? Was he off of like playing Assassin's Creed or something and just came up with Valhalla? Wasn't Charlie Kirk a Christian, a Catholic, quote unquote, Protestant, whatever? And you'll tell him you'll see him again in Valhalla? Bro, if y'all, I just find it hilarious that every single accusation is a confession. They're screaming and hollering about DEI and how people are in positions that they're not qualified for, as literally you have a simpleton, a 5'3" midget, Kash Patel, who's in a position that he's not qualified for, talking about, I'll see you in Valhalla. Bro, you... I want to talk on a serious note, because we have to, we have to lower the temperature. And I think it's serious what has recently happened with this kid named Tyler Robinson, I believe is his name, allegedly. And I think we need to have a moment of silence for Tyler Robinson. We need to show empathy for this kid, because you have to understand that he's probably going through a lot right now. To be turned in by your own father, that's got to have some type of, childhood trauma that's attached to it. And I think it's very harmful that anyone would wish harm or ill will upon Tyler for making a simple mistake, okay? This is a young kid. He's 22. We all make mistakes, do we not? All right? You tell me, as the scripture says, the person without sin, you cast the first stone at Tyler, all right? Tyler made a honest mistake, okay? We don't even know if he's actually the person. He's alleged to be the person. But we need to have a moment of silence for Tyler, because he's probably going through a lot. There's a lot that he has to unpack emotionally. So there's a lot that his family is probably going through as well, despite his traitorous father. So just a moment of silence, just to give empathy for Tyler Robinson. Thank you, thank you.
Someone cooked here.
Having said that, as I said in the intro, what about that black on black crime though, right? You can't make this up, bro. How many times I've been warning these people? How many times I've been warning the lineage of evil? How many times I've been warning the white ignorance? I've been telling y'all for the longest. I brought up the Lyndon B. Johnson quote literally almost in every video that I talk about the lineage of evil, letting you guys know that your own hatred, your own venom is poisoning you. You drinking venom thinking it's gonna hurt black people. That is not what's going on. Sure enough, we have Tyler Robinson. He came from a 2-parent household. Charlie Kirk, if you're watching this video, I'm sure you are. Charlie, if you're watching this video, and I'm sure you are, Tyler Robinson came from a 2-parent household. I know you were like the king of black people on Black Stats. You said that the issue was with the culture of the 1-parent household in the black community. Tyler came from a 2-parent household, a loving 2-parent household. They were pro-American, pro-Republican, pro-Trump. For those of you who don't know, he actually had a MAGA Halloween costume. Just so he had a MAGA Halloween costume, Charlie. Oh, and they loved guns. They taught, his father was a sheriff, if I'm not mistaken. His father was a sheriff, and he taught him guns at an early age. At an early age, Charlie. So if you can tell me how that fits into the equation, I would greatly appreciate it. All right? Thank you.
He's out of line, but he's right.
So for those of you out there as well, if you can tell me how that works, because it seems to go against everything Charlie Kirk was saying about black people. So that only leads me to the conclusion, well, are you guys born that way?
Wake up, nigga.
Is that what we're saying? Because I don't want to go that route, but that's what Charlie Kirk would go, right? That's what he would say. Charlie Kirk was a problem giver. He wasn't a solution giver. He was a problem giver. He would talk about black people very disparagingly. All this black on black crime, gang violence, right? I believe that was his last words. But all of this, and we come to find out little Timmy, or little Tyler in this case, loving parents, husband and wife in the household, all about, God, all about Republicans, all about America, went to school, did good grades, all of this. So, can you explain that one to me? I'm just all ears. Because it seems that what I've been telling you guys is accurate. That if you look at all the black criminals, that it has to do with many cases it can be explained, whether through financial, whether through as far as the area that they're in, influence, a negative influence of the culture that's not even theirs. It's a culture such that Charlie Kirk and his donors actually perpetuated and honestly profited off of, okay? So I just want to be clear that that's very interesting, that when you look at a lot of these Tylers out there, that they all come from a two-parent household. They don't suffer from poverty. They all love God and Jesus, okay? And they're all amosexuals, as they say. And somehow, one or another, they eventually lead to crime.
Ironic.
But you ready for the cherry on top of this delicious sundae? Is that they actually went out of their way to try to blame black people. I kid you not. I don't know. These people are sick. They're sick in the head. Bro, he goes on to talk about, well, you see, Utah people, we didn't do any riots. We didn't, no looting going on.
I want you to look at how Utahns reacted the last 2 nights. There was no rioting. There was no looting. There were no cars set on fire. There's no violence. There were vigils and prayers and people coming together to share the humanity.
Man, fight back! White 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 man, fight back!
And I'm like, bruh, are you serious? Are you serious right now? They somehow find a way to do mental gymnastics to try and vilify or blame black people. You might as well just come out and say, look at what BLM did. And I find it hilarious that we're trying to equate the state taking the life of a citizen versus a white kid doing what he did, we'll say. I don't think that's anywhere near the same. I don't know what to tell you. And ironic enough, your focus is on black people yet again. Now, I don't know what to tell you, but I believe the saying is, if you don't learn, history will repeat itself. So unless you want history to repeat itself, perhaps y'all should start focusing on the white community, okay? Y'all have all these black statistics. 1350, the white people are 12 times. The last few school incidents, we had the naval incident. We just had a Kirk incident. It's been white. From my understanding, 80% of your deaths are from white. So you can, I know it's cute, right? I know you get brownie points from your other racist friends when you talk about George Floyd and everything, but George Floyd didn't do this. So I think you guys need to take some time to focus on the white community and get black people's name out of your freaking mouth. That's what you should do. Or better yet, we'll say this. How about we just get over it? We got to move forward. That's what I'll say about all of this. We got to get over it and move forward.
As much as anybody can be, it's a very terrible thing that happened. And it's just horrible to see that happening. That's just horrible. So surprising to see it here. But we'll have to get over it. We have to move forward.
Anyways, guys, that's the video. Let me know what you guys think. Whether or not you believe, oh, you guys, it's not funny. This is not funny. It's not funny. And you know what? Black on black crime is real. Or if you believe, what does black on black crime have to do about this? Okay. Well, you still have that, right? I guess you can still talk about black on black crime. Knock yourself out. No pun intended, of course. Nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to like, share, comment. If you have a disagreement, well, you know where to find me. Thursday through Saturday, Disagreement Day. Number on screen, you call in and we duke it out. But as I was saying, like, share, comment. Let me know what you guys think. And subscribe. And all that fun stuff. Man, my neck mobility is really good. Yeah, I had to go to a chiropractor because I had like a crick in the left side. But man, it feels good. And be amazing.
And I'll see you in Valhalla.
Here's to Africa's most awarded beer, enjoyed by champions who know their worth.
Breaking news, Tyler Robinson has been named the suspect in the killing of Charlie Kirk, and details surrounding this person are starting to emerge. Kylie, put up the first one. Tyler Robinson and his family don't look like trans liberals to me. Tyler's family is registered Republicans. His father is a minister and former law enforcement. They have family members in the military. Oh, and Tyler's parents introduced him to weapons at an early age. Kylie, put up these photos individually. Here he is with his father, and you notice his father has on kind of that Patriot MAGA-coded style merch. And here he is, was raised in gun culture, shooting guns. So we knew that the person who shot Kirk would have to have experience. Here he is as a very small child with an assault rifle. This has sadly become a huge part of American culture where kids, here he is sitting down with a huge weapon. So this fits not the profile of a radical leftist, because we don't go to gun shows and take photographs with weapons. This sadly is what always comes out about these right-wing extremists. Gun culture is a huge part of it. Loneliness, radicalization online. The Pumps, what did you say, the Utah governor? All this is breaking very quickly. The Associated Press is reporting what, Pumps?
That that Tyler Robinson had become radicalized and got into politics recently, and did not believe what Charlie Kirk believed, but it doesn't go into specifics.
Okay, and then here's what we know about the shooter. Call to Activism is reporting Tyler Robinson of Utah. His father is a retired sheriff. They're Mormon. They're white. He was raised with guns and shooting, and he wore a Trump costume for Halloween. And you see these same photographs again, him with his dad, and his dad with that kind of patriotic black and white American flag, all that MAGA coded hyper masculinity style merch. And you see the gun in his hands when he is a small child. And then next up is that within the MAGA movement, if somebody steps out of line, they start to intercannibalize. And 2 days before the murder of Charlie Kirk, Laura Loomer was calling out Charlie Kirk online in a since deleted tweet. She tweeted that Charlie Kirk had stabbed Trump in the back and didn't have Trump's back and all of this other stuff. She since deleted it. Now she's gone on that she's going to make a list of all the leftists and liberals and Democrats that she thinks contributed to Charlie Kirk's murder. And in fact, what contributed to it is a Republican family that teaches their children about guns at a very young age. And sadly, this has become such a part of right-wing American culture. And I want to say that this makes me sad. This makes me sad for that family, makes me sad for that kid, because our politicians have never, ever responded to gun violence. We've had presidents shot. Charlie Kirk has been shot. Hide and watch. What they're going to do after this is they're going to continue on the same path they always continue upon, which is more guns, more accessible all the time. In Oklahoma, where we live, they have vending machines with ammo in them in 7-Elevens and other type convenience store. I'm not sure if it's a 7-Eleven. I don't want to get that wrong, but like convenience stores, there are ammo vending machines. Billy Baldwin points out this on Twitter. He's not black. Charlie Kirk's killer, Tyler Robinson, he's not black. He's not trans. He's not Muslim. He's not an immigrant. He is not a Democrat. Meet Charlie Kirk's assassin, Tyler Robinson. He is a white, Christian, conservative, Republican male with a gun again. And statistically, when all of this was going on, when Fox News started declaring war, when Jesse Waters and Laura Ingraham, which recklessly tried to rile up their base that somehow the left was in charge of this, statistically, I knew that this was probably a white male, as all shooters are. And this seems to be MAGA-grown terrorism. MAGA is a culture that embraces unrestricted access to guns at all times. They want guns to have more rights than women. This is the don't tread on me crowd. This is the crowd that if anybody steps out of line to their dear leader, they get death threats, even within their own party. You can go no further than to ask Mitt Romney or John McCain before he died of a brain tumor. This is what happens to anybody who steps out of line with the cult leader. But Fox News and these right-wing influencers would have you believe that people like us that want people to have health care, that want a safe place for Charlie Kirk to have gone and done his job. I wanted Charlie Kirk to be able to go do what he wanted to do, even though I disagree with all of the hateful shit that he says. The world that I want to live in is a place where Charlie Kirk is not shot. And so what they've done, what Fox News and all of these right-wing influencers putting targets on so many liberals' backs, they've started a whole website about Charlie's murderers and listing people online and doxing them. And this is a homegrown problem. Donald Trump has the most divisive rhetoric that I've ever heard in my life. I've never heard American presidents speak out against their own citizens. And while all this was going on, these right-wing influencers were riling up, and Fox News was riling up the base and saying it's all these leftists. The Utah governor also revealed that there's a huge bot farm of Chinese and Russian bots that were in the algorithms owned by all of Trump's supporters. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said Russian and Chinese bots are stoking violence online in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. So when Donald Trump found out that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated, executed, killed in cold blood, he was meeting with architects about his ballroom. Mind you, the night before, Vladimir Putin sent drones over a NATO nation, Poland. One would think that an American president would have been in the Situation Room the next day, but he was meeting with architects for a vanity project that he has. This is a very serious time. We do not have serious people in charge that care about cleaning up their own political party, and they attack anybody who steps out of line against Donald Trump. And I want to leave you all with Kash Patel at the press conference this morning. And I want to remind everybody that Kash Patel did a podcast before he was the head of the FBI, and he wore a shirt that said Cash Money. And he sold ivermectin and all this other snake oil. And all he did was talk about the release of the Epstein files ad nauseum on this podcast. And that was enough for Trump. And he went hard in the paint for Trump. This guy doesn't care about facts. The guy doesn't care about truth. He was a Trump loyalist, is a Trump loyalist. And the FBI has been built off the backs of career law enforcement people. The MAGA Republicans have started just a smear campaign about law enforcement, and they fired people that were career law enforcement people and put Cash Money Patel in charge of the FBI. That's like Pumps and me being in charge of the FBI because we supported Kamala or something. It's insane. All right, play the clip.
This is what happens when you let good cops be cops. The FBI and our partners are proud to stand here today together to bring justice to the family of Charlie Kirk.
You know what he's not going to say? What he's not going to say is what a objective FBI official would say is, we have a problem with domestic terrorism, and we have a gun problem, and we are getting less and less safe. Children shouldn't be at gun shows holding assault rifles at a young age, because then at some point they spend some time online and they get radicalized and they go shoot people in cold blood. This is not a civil society. This is a homegrown, MAGA-grown incident, and we were wrong. Everybody was wrong that is trying to rile people up about this. We need to get to the root of the problem, but they don't want to, because this administration pardoned all of the January 6 violent offenders, and they have the audacity on Fox News to tell you that the people who want these Trump supporters to have health care and have livable wages and have their Social Security benefits waiting for them, they want to tell you that we're violent, and it's bullshit, and they're liars, and this is homegrown MAGA shit as always. All right, we'll be back later on today. Support our show by click the link below so that we can keep doing this every day. Go buy our
Hey everyone, it's Richard. You're watching The Plain Bagel. It's been 7 months since Trump first started what would end up being America's trade war against most of the world, with tariffs being the market-dominating topic of the year and the slew of trade announcements bringing America's effective tariff rate to roughly 17%, the highest it's been since 1935. All under the premise that the tariffs would benefit the US by getting foreign countries to pay for access to US consumers, bringing manufacturing jobs back to America, and ultimately spurring economic growth for the country. Now, tariffs have long been a tool used by countries to keep foreign companies out of what are deemed to be sensitive industries, but the idea that they could spur economic growth or this sort of prosperity is a fairly controversial idea, not really supported by economic theories or empirical evidence. So it's no surprise that we saw these tariff announcements followed by market sell-offs and predictions of surging inflation and a recession by the end of the year. And yet, that hasn't happened. Prices so far haven't really moved as high as was initially feared. The stock market has returned to pushing new record highs, and the economy has actually been posting better than expected results. All the while, the White House is claiming to have brought in trillions of dollars of foreign investment to the country, supporting the idea that seemingly against all odds, the US has managed to hardball its way into prosperity, using its massive consumer base as a bargaining chip to negotiate many concessions from foreign countries and get them to pay tribute to their economy. But depending on where you look, the figures can paint a very different picture. Labor, for example, has continued to disappoint. In August, we saw the massive 258,000 downward revision to the estimated May and June hiring numbers, with a more recent estimate actually pointing to a decrease in non-farm payrolls for the month of June. So are Trump's tariffs actually working? Is Trump making like Cynthia Erivo and defying gravity? Or is the US economy actually sputtering here? Well, with us now being 6 months into this period of high tariffs, we now have some more data to help better understand what's happened year to date. And today we'll look into some key areas and discuss how they've been impacted by Trump's tariffs and, importantly, why they might have been moving against expectations. But before hopping into that, it's worth understanding the opposing view, why many economists are against Trump's tariff regime. You see, like other forms of taxation, tariffs are considered to be an inefficient price distortion to the market, something that both lowers the quantity traded and increases prices. And while they can be important to utilize from a national security standpoint, when it comes to free trade, they generally prevent countries from taking full advantage of specialization. The idea that if different countries focus on different areas and get better at those things, the group of trading partners as a whole will mutually benefit from higher quality goods or lower prices. Now, a big part of Trump's tariff campaign is America's large trade deficit, the fact that the country imports hundreds of billions of dollars more than it exports to other countries. But this isn't inherently a bad thing for the United States. Yes, there can be consequences to having a large trade deficit, but it's quite normal for a wealthy nation to be a net importer of goods. And for the US specifically, this deficit has actually helped the US dollar and financial markets maintain their global dominance, since this exporting of dollars contributes to it being the most widely used currency globally. Not to mention that being able to buy a foreign good for less than you could domestically comes with its own benefits. And while yes, tariffs may allow certain domestic industries to prosper with the protections put in place, thereby creating jobs in those select areas, it's generally the view that the higher costs passed on to the consumers and the general job loss from the distortion isn't generally worth the protection. In fact, while Trump's tariffs on steel during his first term did create thousands of new jobs in that industry, this benefit was offset by the impact to manufacturing, where higher input costs led to a relative decline in employment. And with us seeing many examples historically of countries hurting their economic output by imposing tariffs, you can see why many economists generally advocate for free trade. But it brings us to the first main question that's puzzled a lot of people by now. If tariffs are so bad for inflation and the like, why aren't prices rising? After all, tariffs should directly increase the cost of a good because they are literally increasing the cost of buying that thing. So you should see prices increase as a result. Yet Trump has highlighted that inflation is virtually non-existent, except for windmills, I guess, stating that it's foreign countries who are paying the higher price of these tariffs, not Americans. Now, both of those statements are technically incorrect, given that tariffs are paid for at the importer level, and we are still obviously having inflation. It is true that the latest inflation figures have been below expectations, with CPI price levels increasing just 2.9% as of the most recent release, above the central bank's target, but still fairly below the higher rates feared by economists. Meanwhile, the PPI, which measures prices charged by producers, was recently reported to have increased 2.6%, with the level actually dropping 0.1% month over month in August. Something that, among other things, has prompted many to argue that tariffs are actually deflationary, not inflationary. And it is true that foreign companies are absorbing some of the costs of the tariffs here, because while they don't pay the cost directly, they have been lowering their prices to compensate for the higher fee. In fact, Goldman Sachs estimates that consumers so far have only borne about 1/5 of the entire cost of Trump's tariffs, with Temu, for example, recently reducing the price of its popular products by an average of 18%, supporting the idea that Trump has seemingly pulled off the impossible of raising record levels of tariff revenue without pushing up prices meaningfully. The problem, however, is that it's not foreign companies absorbing the lion's share of these levies. According to Goldman Sachs, foreign exporters have actually paid less than US consumers, covering just 14% of these new fees, while US businesses have covered the remaining 64%, meaning effectively that domestic parties have paid roughly 86% of the record-breaking tariff revenue that's been brought in. Now, the reason US companies have willingly taken the brunt of these levies is because in 2025, we've seen consumer confidence drop to its lowest point since the pandemic. Many companies are concerned that consumers would rather forego spending than pay higher prices. And with the trade situation being so volatile, with new trade deals being announced and changes made, it appears companies are trying to avoid alienating their consumer base and waiting to see how things ultimately shake out. So that helps to explain why we haven't seen this surge of inflation that many expected by now. But another component here to consider is the inventory stockpiling. On the announcement of tariffs, we actually saw the US increase its trade deficit to a record high as companies increased imports trying to get ahead of the new levy, something that temporarily has allowed companies to put off their price hikes as they haven't yet paid more for their own inputs. The problem, however, is that neither of these mitigation methods are sustainable. Goldman Sachs estimates that by the fall, consumers will be covering 67% of the cost of tariffs as companies increasingly pass along their price increases. Now, it's a common misconception that if you have a tariff rate of, say, 50% on steel imports, that will increase the price of most goods directly by 50%, assuming they have imported components. However, the cost of final products has many other factors baked into it in addition to imports, including labor involved with final assembly domestically, as well as retail staff who sell that product, neither of which would be impacted directly by a tariff rate. Nonetheless, many forecasts have pointed to a broad general price increase of 2 percentage points above what we're currently seeing, meaning that we could see inflation of 4 to 5% across the board once businesses pass on more of the tariff costs. So while the current inflation situation has been used by some as evidence that economists have been wrong, and to be clear, they are wrong a lot, you can see that it's not so much that tariffs aren't impacting price levels, but more so that companies are trying to compensate for it and hold off hiking their own prices as long as possible in the face of a weak consumer base. Now, as for why some have posited that tariffs are actually deflationary, that stems from some monetary schools of economic thought that argue that all forms of taxation are deflationary in nature, given that they pull money out of the economy and thereby reduce money supply and liquidity, which is a real factor in consideration. Taxation does have a depressing impact on money supply, and if we experience a recession, it could very well lead at some point to a decrease in price levels, as economic contractions tend to be deflationary. But this real deflationary pressure of tariffs is often offset by the direct impact tariffs have on prices, the disruption it causes to supply chains, which brings other costs as companies have to set up new infrastructure and the economy deals with the deadweight brought on by taxes. And in this case, the fact that the US government is directly offsetting any deflationary influence from tariffs with the Big Beautiful Bill, which cuts taxes, increases government spending, and is forecasted to increase the government deficit by $1 trillion over the next decade, even after accounting for tariff revenue brought in. And thankfully, we don't have to theorize about the relationship between tariffs and inflation because, again, we have empirical evidence to demonstrate that while the impact is not always clear-cut, historically, tariffs tend to lead to higher price levels for the imposing country. The circumstances where you often see prices fall is when, again, the tariffs occur during or cause a recession. During periods of economic expansion, inflation is actually exacerbated by tariffs. And as a side note, regarding the PPI measure that many use as evidence of deflation, it was actually services that saw a decrease in price and ultimately pulled the measure down. Goods, where tariffs are actually applying, still saw their prices increase. But then what about the other angle, the manufacturing jobs? Trump has long argued that the US has hollowed out its manufacturing capabilities by relying on foreign countries, and that tariffs would help bring these jobs back on shore. Is that in fact what we're seeing? Well, no. While we did in fact see the trade deficit for the United States fall 25% year over year in July, that also followed a period of record high imports, so it is somewhat to be expected. And domestic manufacturing hasn't really shown meaningful signs of reigniting. One gauge of manufacturing activity, the S&P Global US Manufacturing PMI, did in fact see a strong rebound in August. Another gauge, the Institute of Supply Management's Manufacturing Index, instead showed that the US had its 6th month of manufacturing activity contraction, with Susan Spence, the chair of the survey committee, indicating that 69% of manufacturing GDP was estimated to be in contraction. We've also seen sluggish performance from other indicators, such as the real final sales to private domestic purchasers, which measures domestic purchases of domestic production. And while the figure was better than expected with its recent release, it's still lower than it was a year ago, despite the current trade barriers. And as we alluded to when it comes to jobs, things haven't looked so promising, with the latest update pointing to a continued decline at the aggregate level, with unemployment ticking to its highest point in 4 years, as the US saw more job seekers than job openings for the first time since April 2021. And for manufacturing jobs specifically, the area that the tariffs are seemingly targeting, well, jobs have actually fallen for the 4th month in a row. Now, of course, it is to be expected that jobs wouldn't surge immediately on the announcement of tariffs. It takes time for companies to build out their domestic manufacturing infrastructure and capacity, and so it could take years before we see a meaningful impact on manufacturing jobs. And Trump has argued that with the trade negotiations and record amounts of investment coming into the country, jobs are sure to follow. Apple, Project Stargate, Nvidia, and a number of other companies have made their own sizable domestic investment promises in the hundreds of billions, while countries like the United Arab Emirates, Japan, and the collective European Union have seemingly agreed to invest trillions of dollars into the United States as part of their trade negotiations. And if we saw these manufacturers and countries follow through on those investment promises, that could very well lead to a meaningful boost to economic activity in the United States. After all, America's total foreign direct investment in 2024 was around $330 billion. So investments in the trillions of dollars, even if spread out over Trump's term, would move the needle quite a bit. The problem is that it's questionable how much follow through we'll actually see with these deals. While Japan has moved the closest to cementing its investment promise with a recently signed memorandum of understanding outlining the terms of the arrangement, the Gulf state investment promises so far represent verbal commitments that would be challenging for the economies to meet. Not to mention, some of these actually stem from prior agreements before Trump's term. The European Union doesn't actually have grounds to enforce a $600 billion investment from its member states, with it admitting that this is just what's expected to come from private companies. And for South Korea, who promised a $350 billion investment, we're already seeing disagreements over the terms of that investment package. Now, yes, we've seen domestic companies promising to invest more in the US, Apple being one of the key examples of a situation where Trump has seemingly been successful in convincing a company to bring manufacturing into the United States. But for many of these investment promises, the largest of which are for tech or pharmaceutical companies, it's unclear whether these announcements are based on tariffs or just the surging demand for AI infrastructure and drug development in the United States. The Taiwanese semiconductor company TSMC, for example, which made one of the largest commitments from a foreign company at $100 billion, actually made this announcement in March, before any tariffs had been announced on Taiwan or semiconductors. With in fact a Reuters review finding that a good chunk of investments claimed by the Trump administration were either previously secured under Biden or just part of routine spending. And while a lot of these investment promises do span multiple years, so far the infrastructure build-out needed to bring manufacturing jobs back to the US just hasn't really kicked off yet. There's this great chart that was shared with me that shows that US factory construction is actually down 7% from last year. Ironically, thanks in part to companies finishing up their projects under Biden-era incentive programs like CHIPS or the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, of course, this, or really any of the other factors we've talked about, might change in the future. I think hopefully this video has demonstrated that in the short term, you do have these distortions that make it hard to figure out what's actually going on. Some of the gauges we referenced, for example, like the opposing manufacturing indices, rely on executive surveys and may not be perfectly accurate. Well, even labor data, as we've seen, is prone to meaningful revisions, which was recently exemplified by the massive nearly 1 million jobs that were cut out of past estimates for the 12-month period ending this past March. But the point is to highlight that while we've heard of these lofty promises from different countries, companies, and the like, we just haven't yet seen follow through with it. And there hasn't been much evidence to date that on the net, America's economy has benefited from tariffs. But then why is the economy growing so much? After all, we saw in the second quarter that US GDP actually grew 3.3% year over year, faster than expected and higher than its long-term average. Well, part of this is again the distorting impact of tariffs. Imports, for example, contributed to a lower first quarter GDP print and a higher second quarter print. But one aspect to consider is that the US economy does have other strong factors moving in its favor. For one, there's the big beautiful bill. Yes, while a controversial piece of legislation, given that it does increase the US government's debt load, which has caused some turmoil in the US bond market, it did also come with tax cuts and other things that could stimulate the economy. There's also, of course, the AI gold rush, with the UBS estimating that tech companies will spend $375 billion on AI infrastructure in 2025 and $500 billion next year. All of which in the short term translates into more activity for the US economy, regardless of how these investments ultimately pan out. But the point is that the economy has seemingly been performing in spite of tariffs, not really because of them. Again, most empirical research points to a net negative impact on economic activity and a rise in unemployment when tariffs are imposed. And most forecasts are calling for a 1 percentage point impact to US GDP as a result of Trump's current tariffs. And yes, the US may be able to use tariffs to negotiate better trade deals, and that could ultimately still benefit the US economy. And that's where the discussion does get a bit more complicated, because you would then have to factor in what's ultimately agreed upon. But over the long term, when you ignore the negotiation aspect of this, and if you look past the distortions in the short term, it's very likely that tariffs will dampen overall economic activity. And while it may benefit some and the US may still avoid a recession in spite of these tariffs, it doesn't mean that the tariffs are a contributor to economic growth. Now, with all that being said, hopefully it does go to show that we don't face a clear picture here. Despite all the factors we're looking at, we can't really know for certain whether things will move one direction or the other, whether tariffs will allow the US to negotiate better trade deals that ultimately benefit the economy, if it then leads to, say, dropping the tariffs, or if the tariffs stay in place and hurt the economy overall. But hopefully it emphasizes the importance of going beyond just individual data points to try and understand what's actually happening behind the scenes, rather than taking individual charts or what have you at face value. It's important that when you look at figures like inflation, you dig a little bit deeper. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you like this video, please do make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It does help the channel tremendously. And let me know your thoughts on the topic, as well as any other topics you'd like me to cover on the channel. I've been trying to branch out from just tariff-related stuff, but I wanted to give a quick update on what we've seen to date. And of course, if we see a major update, I'll cover that as well. But hopefully we'll be diversifying a little bit. Anyway, thanks again for joining me. And as always, be safe out there.
Episode 3 of The Finance Ghost Plugged In with Capitec features Oberetile Semenya. Obi is a property entrepreneur with interests across the value chain, from development to sales. We talked.
So it looks like the central banks of the world are slowly losing control over interest rates.
There is breaking news as we come on the air. The Trump economy is sputtering. We learned this morning that job growth in the past 3 months has all but ended.
The jobs numbers changed again, and we're now showing we actually lost 13,000 jobs in June.
If you pay any attention to financial news, you've probably heard the same line every time the stock market has a little whoopsie-daisy.
$58 billion wiped off the exchange today.
$136 billion was wiped off.
$5 trillion in value had been wiped from the markets in just 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's right. Every time green line does not go up, we are told some company or the market has lost, destroyed, or wiped out however many billions of dollars. But alright then, where does that money actually go? It might not surprise you to learn that headlines like this are written more for shock and awe than genuine insight. But the simple truth is that the money doesn't actually go anywhere, because it never existed in the first place. Sort of. If you can look beyond the flashy headlines like this and actually understand what they are trying to say, you are going to be much better equipped to make sensible financial decisions when everybody else is busy losing their minds and, if they are lucky enough, maybe even their retirement savings too. This basic understanding has probably actually never been more important than it is right now, because the stock market is breaking new records every single week. Nobody knows if or when the party will stop, but what we do know is that in this particular case, the money doesn't actually have anywhere else to go.
$5 trillion in value had been wiped from the markets in just 3 weeks.
Gold prices hit a record high on Tuesday.
The dream of owning the house with the white picket fence increasingly giving way to white picket renters.
You could buy a house tomorrow if the price was right, if the interest rates were where they needed to be.
Help for the economy from Washington remains nowhere in sight.
So there are really 3 different levels of technical explanation for what happens to money during a crash. The good enough for most people level, the armchair market analyst level, and then the level that considers debt, consumption, and all the different asset markets that are getting kind of weird at the moment. Now, most people don't even get level 1 right, but I promise none of this is as complicated as the financial bros would like you to think. And actually seeing how these markets work is the only way to understand how messed up they really are at the moment. But alright, most of the time when headlines are talking about billions of dollars being destroyed or whatever, what they are really saying is that the market capitalization of a company or group of companies has been repriced. This is just calculated using the number of outstanding shares multiplied by the price the last share was traded at. So for example, Nvidia currently has about 24 billion outstanding shares, and right now those shares are trading at a price of about $170, which gives the company a market cap of $4.1 trillion. If for some reason tomorrow people decided to start trading Nvidia shares at $85, then it would have the market cap of the company and you would inevitably see headlines about Nvidia losing $2 trillion. But they didn't really lose $2 trillion. They were just revalued using this very crude calculation. Now, technically, this could actually help NVIDIA's ongoing business operations. Since the AI boom, the company has been doing a lot of share buybacks, where they will use their profits to buy company stock off existing shareholders to take it out of circulation. They are only supposed to do this when management thinks the company is undervalued. So if their stock halves in price, they will get twice as many shares for the same money, which should be a good thing, right? Well, this is assuming, of course, that they aren't just doing stock buybacks to drive up an already hyped up stock. Part of what is making the current stock market so strange at the moment is that by far the biggest net purchaser of shares in these companies are these companies. According to the Fed's Z1 financial accounts, households made net purchases of about $100 billion of stock in 2024. This was dwarfed by listed corporations that did over $625 billion worth of net buying, meaning that companies were buying 6 times more of their own stock than actual stockholders were. Now, that doesn't seem great, but it's actually worse than it sounds. The whole point of a stock market is that it's supposed to be a place where companies can go and sell their shares to raise money to fund business operations. This net sales figure also includes the company subtracting from this net number by conducting IPOs. The total gross value of stock buybacks was over $1 trillion within 2024 alone. It just so happens that companies also raised about $375 billion in the same year. Now, this has helped to increase market capitalization by driving up share prices, but that's not even the biggest problem. It will actually get more important later on as we go into how asset markets are supposed to function. But for now, for level 1, a market crash is just a readjustment in market capitalization. Unless a company is planning to sell its own stock to raise money to fund future projects, its day-to-day market capitalization shouldn't impact its performance. Market capitalization is kind of like GDP. It's a number that we use a lot because it's sort of easy to calculate, and it's good enough as a rough indication of if things are going in the right direction or not. Now, a lot of people, when they learn this, take it to mean that market cap is irrelevant. A $10 banana is no better than a banana that's on clearance for $5. And while that's true, a sudden price drop on anything can be an indication that there is something rotting away beneath the surface. So, for the next level of understanding, you need to do what the journalists writing the headlines aren't willing to do, and actually follow the money. Now, I know I just said that if a stock halves in value, that doesn't necessarily mean that any money has gone anywhere. But in highly liquid markets, such a scenario can only really happen one way. The Nasdaq doesn't get to slap a 50% off clearance label on NVIDIA stock like Walmart does on questionable milk. The way the price moves in these kinds of markets is that if there are more sellers than buyers, the price falls, and if there are more buyers than sellers, the price rises. When people are panic selling stocks, they are still getting money in exchange for those stocks. It may not be as much as they wanted, but what they then do with that money is where things get interesting. Let's say you had some spare money. Yeah, I know, but just pretend with me for a second. With your pile of cash, you have some options. You can invest into the stock market, real estate, bonds, gold, alternatives like cryptocurrency, or you could just hold on to your cash. Alternatively, if you just want to enjoy your life right now, you could spend that money on goods and services like a new car, a bigger house to live in, or a nice vacation. All of these activities that improve your quality of life are generally classified as consumption. Depending on where you and everybody else who has spare money puts their cash, it will increase the value of these markets. So if everybody buys gold, its price will increase as demand increases on an asset with limited supply. Now, stocks, bonds, and real estate are kind of unique because they generate their own cash flow to give money back to you. Stocks do this through dividends, bonds through interest, and real estate through rent. Those cash flows come from other people deciding to put their money into the consumption pile, which becomes revenue for these 3 asset classes. But all of these other assets really only make returns by having more people buy in at a progressively higher price. When the stock market crashes, what is really happening is everybody trying to grab their cash out of that particular asset market. They do this either because they think the market won't generate as much cash flow in the future, or more often, just to get their cash out before everybody else lowers their price by taking their cash out. Now, if you were lucky enough to get your cash back before everybody else, you have a choice. During a lot of market crashes, people